Today I'm going to give you a little taste of our program in multi-faith spiritual storytelling, multi-faith Ambiguity. And I want to address a very important topic. It's the topic of ambiguity. Now, if you're a storyteller, if you've paid close attention to literature and stories, you know that ambiguity can be a great tool. It can be the thing that allows a reader or a listener to discover their own kind of geography of the story within the broad structures of the author's intent. But this isn't really the kind of ambiguity that we're talking about when we talk about spiritual stories, especially not spiritual stories that are based on ancient languages. In these stories and in those languages, ambiguity has a much more significant meaning and purpose. When you and I normally talk about ambiguity, we think about things that aren't clear, usually two ways of saying something and we're not sure which one is correct. That's our mission, is to take these two ambiguous meanings and figure out which one is right. That is not the purpose of ambiguity in spiritual storytelling. On the contrary, it's quite the opposite. When you encounter ambiguity in spiritual stories, what your challenge is to find the way in which both of those meanings are equally true. Now, that's something that doesn't sit well with a linear narrative. It doesn't fit well with a modern language, but this is very much the way that our ancient stories were constructed. So let me give you an example. You're probably familiar with the story of Rachel. Rachel, who was having a terrible pregnancy, she had twins in her womb, and it was so miserable that she cries out to God, "If this is all there is, then why am I alive?" She was having a really terrible, terrible time. And in one of those significant moments in the Bible, God answers her. And God says, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples will be dispersed from your insides. One people will be mightier than the other people. Here's where the ambiguity comes. In Hebrew, it says, V'rav Ya'avod Tza'ir, which in English means 2 things. One thing it means is the older will serve the younger. And the other thing it means is the younger will serve the older. In other words, exact opposites. Which is the correct one, we might be tempted to ask? Is the younger going to serve the older, or the older serve the younger? The fact of the matter is that in biblical Hebrew, as in many ancient languages, we aren't given the luxury of picking one. We have to make both of them true. Now, as you might imagine, this is a difficult thing to do if you're trying to tell a linear story. You're trying to lift people up, and you encounter this situation where you have to say 2 things that are exactly opposite and have them both be true at the same time. How do you do that? And how could we possibly understand this statement from God that says the younger will serve the older and the older will serve the younger? Well, if you're interested and if you'd like to know, that's what we'll be studying in the course. Hope you can join me.